If you have a favorite part of the Bible, or maybe just a favorite part of the Old Testament, there's a very good chance that that part is the book of Psalms, or maybe not even that, but maybe you're familiar with some of the Psalms. A favorite is Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And so lots of people come to the Psalms with some familiarity. The Psalms are a new kind of literature for us to consider, and I'm going to walk you through some of this. So you're used to this character by now. We're going to talk about how the Psalms are different from prophecy. So whereas in prophecy, remember we think of this as God. In prophecy, the arrow goes the other way. God tells the prophet and the prophet speaks. In the Psalms, this poetry is a little bit different, and it is poetry just like in the prophets. However, the Psalms are people's expressions to God. And so the direction is different from what we've seen before, which is fascinating. And so this is a completely new type of literature. We haven't seen anything like this before. We've been through narratives and history and law and poetry that comes from God and is spoken by the prophet, but we haven't necessarily seen the prayers of the people or the songs of the people. And that's what we encounter in the book of Psalms. So the book of Psalms is referred to as the Psalter, which you may or may not be familiar with. It gets its name from the Greek psalmos, which means hymn. And that's what we call it in English, right? We use that Greek that Greek word to talk about the Psalms. However, in Hebrew, the book of Psalms is referred to as Sefer Tehillim, which means book of praises or book of hymns. So not too far apart. One of the best ways to think about the book of Psalms is if you have a hymnal at your church, and some people don't anymore, which is always shocking to me because I love the hymns. But if you have a hymnal or a prayer book, like the Book of Common Prayer, or just a plain old hymnal, that's kind of what the book of Psalms is like. These are the prayers of the people and the songs of the people of God. So that's how I want you to start thinking about the book of Psalms. The Psalms are introspective. We refer to this as theology from below, and that is because the Psalms deal with people's emotions, questions, and thoughts towards God. So rather than, God saying, this is how things are, the Psalms reflect people struggling with God, struggling with their own circumstances, their own emotions, and their own life, and speaking that to God. So, for example, the reason that this is important is because in your own prayer life, you've probably noticed that you're not always theologically accurate. And sometimes the Psalms can be that way. So, for example, theology from below means that a person may cry out to God and say, God, why is this happening? Why did you cause my mom to have cancer? That doesn't happen in the Psalter, but you can imagine something like that. If the Psalms say something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that God did cause your mom to have cancer, right? That's not necessarily a theologically sound statement, depending on where you're coming from. But your sense of things and your emotional state is crying out to God because of that. And the way that you're experiencing your relationship with God at any given moment is reflected in that prayer. So that's why we talk about this as theology from below. It's a reflection of the relationship that people have with God and the way that they experience that relationship with God. So, you've got all of these different emotions reflected right here in this picture, and the Psalms reflect that. Our human experience is unique, and each person is different, and each community is different, and so the ways that different communities and different individuals interact with God is going to be different. The Psalms reflect some some different snapshots of that. What is it like to be in relationship with God and to bring your troubles, your joys, and your praise to God? That's what the Psalms have for us. Dating the Psalms. You know that I love to tell you when things were written. Unfortunately, with the Psalms, we cannot date them. It is impossible. And I've got Joey here just to make a little joke about going on dates. I don't know. I thought it was funny at the time. Anyway, sometimes with some of the Psalms, you can get a general idea. So Psalm 147, for example, mentions the exile. And so it was probably written after the exile, reflecting on that reality. Psalm 23 says that it's a Psalm of David, and it may very well be. And if it is, then we can date that to about 1000 BC. So you get a little glimpse sometimes, but you don't always get the whole picture of when a certain psalm was written. And that's because they're reflecting the lives of regular, ordinary people and these kind of perennial problems and perennial joys that people have. So they can really, one of the nice things about the Psalms is that they are not only, remember with the prophets, I was like, this is applicable to a specific circumstance, right? And that was really important to me. With the Psalms, that's not so. The Psalms are applicable to many different circumstances throughout time, which is kind of neat. Now, one of the things that I do want you to know, however, is that it seems like the book of Psalms was collected, brought together, and put into the order that it is in after the return from the exile. So after Cyrus's decree, you can go home now. Sometime during that time period, when they're reestablishing worship in the temple, the book of Psalms came together and was put into the order that it is in now during that time. One of the fascinating things about the book of Psalms is that, let me see if I can figure out how exactly to put this. It appears to have been edited over time. It was put into a specific order, and individual psalms or groups of psalms were probably edited over time. Now, we're familiar with this sort of thing. So take, for instance, an old hymn, something like, what is the one that I have here? YouTube always dings me if I play one of the YouTube videos, so I might attach it. It's got that refrain, the wonderful cross, in it. Anyway, you may have experienced in your worship experiences old hymns reused and repurposed with maybe a new chorus line, and that's what this video is. So we still do this sort of thing today, where we take something that was maybe written in 1850 and we repurpose it for a new setting and maybe add a couple new lyrics or maybe add a new bridge or something like that, a new tune, what have you. It seems like with many of the Psalms, we can see some of that happening as well. So that's just to give you kind of a general idea of where do these Psalms come from? Well, they're the prayers of the people, and some of them may date all the way back to 1000 BC. However, they weren't put together into the form that we have now until the 500s, sometime after 539. And through that long swath of history, as the people continued to worship God, they would add to and change and do things with the Psalms that that we continue to do today. So can you date the Psalms? No, but they're still exciting and wonderful and applicable to this day. So good stuff with the Psalms.